Hello and welcome back to Tech TV. Today we're talking about an announcement that the government in the UK is making around digital ID cards. Essentially what the government has said is that they're going to be introducing ID cards for the first time in something like 70 years for all adults in the UK. Now, this is not a new topic. I myself have written on this on a number of different occasions, talking about the potential benefits as well as the challenges. And there have been certain key politicians like Tony Blair and William Hague advocating the use of cards for some time. But at every previous attempt, it's been shot down because it's been an unpopular measure that has been voted down by Parliament on every occasion. Pete, as we approach a big announcement now, the government is focusing on the fact that it's a solution potentially to the immigration problem. How accurate is this, and what are the benefits and challenges that we're going to be facing as the government seeks to introduce digital ID cards?
Well, I think the biggest challenge that the government's going to be facing is trying to do the technology behind all of this. The government doesn't have exactly the greatest track record on technology. If it did, we would have been making considerable advances out of the NHS database, which is probably one of the most valuable databases in the world. So that's one of the challenges. There is also going to be an additional challenge politically, and I suppose one of the other challenges, massive challenge politically for the government in all of this, is going to be the presence of Tony Blair in all of this. This is a man who has received £257 million from Larry Ellison, who may have a vested interest in all of this, and he seems to be affecting government policy. So I think that that's going to be a significant issue. But then the final hurdle will be convincing the population at large about this, because the population don't trust government. In poll after poll after poll, we find that the organisation of the population that trusts less is government.
Obviously, there are going to be big technology challenges here, as well as the sort of sentiment of the public. To help us address some of those technology challenges, we've got a special guest. I'd like to welcome into the studio, coming from a very early hour where she is in the States, Irene, the Group CEO of Dataswyft. Irene, thank you so much for joining us. We'd like to start by looking at the potential benefits here. I don't know, Irene, if you could focus on what you think could potentially be gained from ID cards.
I think we live in a digital economy, and I think digital identity is part of a wider understanding that there needs to be some proper infrastructure in the in the digital economy around identity. The issue is not whether identity is needed. It is definitely needed. The question is who issues it and who holds the data, who owns it. There are huge benefits for that. Number one, if you think about it from the disenfranchised, from the marginalized, it gives them visibility. Now, visibility is a double-edged sword. It gives you visibility so that you can be seen and heard and access to resource. But who sees, who hears, who tracks becomes, the issue. So the huge benefits, because visibility gives investability. Visibility gives the ability to say, I am who I am, I've done amazing things, I'm credible, I can get loans, I can get healthcare. That visibility is an incredible benefit of digital ID.
But one of the things, though, with that is it's also a means by which you can be tracked, isn't it? I mean, and that's where this trust element comes in. But let's go back to that a little later. I mean, this notion of the benefits of ID. One of the problems there will be my ID card will become me. And then what about these other governments that will say, hang on, give us your ID card so we know who you are. And they may not have the same interest in me that I think they have.
Yes, I think GDPR rules and also data protection rules globally have already made that clear, that any request for identity and any request for any information about you has to be backed by a legitimate purpose. If you want to understand me from a tax perspective, ask me for my tax number. If you want to treat me, ask me for my NHS number. And I think the idea of an all-encompassing one piece of digital ID, it's a really bad idea. What I would like to see, and I think that's where the biggest potential benefits can be unlocked, is that you tie legitimate purpose to the different parts of your identity. And people who want those proofs can ask for the different parts of your identity, and you can present them at the right time. I think we tend to conflate the fact that you get the benefits of ID, but then there's just one issuer of it. And it's all encompassing for everything. The current technology available in this world today suggests that you do not need to do that anymore. Back in the day, yes, oh my God, just, give me a card already, But today, you don't have to do that. Today, someone can nudge you to even answer the smallest question. Surely you can break down proofs into different parts of who a person is.
But from the practicality side of things, the government is saying at the moment that every adult in the UK will need to have an ID card, but they won't be forced to use it. There will always be other means of identifying yourself. And I've done some studies and some articles where I've identified something like 46 different ways of identifying yourself for different government services in the UK. And that includes everything from your NHS number to your passport number to your driving licence number to your national insurance number to your unique tax record for HMRC and tax. What we have here is an absolute mess, and that's preventing integrated government. If we could have a unified system, then that would potentially provide benefits, surely, because we'd be able to crack down on fraud, because there would be a unique identifier that would be common across various different government departments, and we'd have integrated government so that you could have some linkage between your benefits and your tax, or between your health and your social support. Surely this is all to the benefit. I mean, this is assuming that the government can get it right. And on top of that, there will be instances where there will be pressure for this to become compulsory rather than optional. And when it becomes compulsory, you won't just need an online version, you'll need some sort of physical version, because there are always going to be instances where you'll need to prove your identity and you won't have access. So these benefits surely are massive. What's wrong, therefore, in a single identity and a single provider of identity?
Okay, let me break that down a little bit. If you think about the parts of you that lives in 10 different towers, just think about 10 different buildings as government agencies or enterprises or companies that have pieces of you. And if you go think about 10 buildings, and you've got to want to share. The government's idea is these 10 buildings go into one center building. And that center building is going to pull from everyone to give that one center building. And in order to do that, you've got to build these sky bridges between these 10 buildings. That's very expensive, sky bridges. There is a simpler way, which is the guy at the ground floor, me, who owns all the data, or who is part of the information involved across all 10. If it was mine, it'd be a simple wallet, isn't it? In an analog world today, that's what we have. We have 10 cards, but we go everywhere with it. We show whichever card is needed at each time because I own these cards. So instead of sky bridges into a center, could you just not bring the information to the ground floor to me? I can walk around at the lobby towards 10 buildings and show who I am. There are two different ways of looking at it. The centralized system in the center, or decentralized to people who own their information and therefore present the necessary proof provided by these towers and the centralized system when they're asked of it.
I think this is the key, isn't it? Because it was being argued yesterday on the BBC and in The Guardian that the way that you win this argument, this trust argument, is with distributed data. If you're having the data held centrally, then you get this issue of a lack of trust. And to be perfectly honest, we do need to evolve this, don't we, Irene? Because it was William the Conqueror who came up with the idea of a centralized database so he could tax people, so that he could scare the let's be polite, he could scare the hell out of them. And that's what we've got to go away from. The government doesn't trust the people. And there is yet another factor in that too, which is my identity. Yeah, I should be the one who owns this and who actually negotiates this interaction with the government. Is that a fair?
Yes, and when we look at civil society, we've never had a breakdown in trust till we kind of went into the digital economy and started to think that there is a surveillance going on. Or in normal civil society, in the analog world, we hold cards. Nobody look at what our cards are. Nobody looks at our wallets. Quite private. And I bring whatever I choose. Why can't we mirror that world rather than create a world where trust is now needed because you've changed the way civil society fundamentally worked, which was I am private, I have a right to privacy, I have a right to create my distributed self in the form of a crazy little wallet and the cards that I have and the loyalty bits and pieces that I have. Why can't that be the world? Because that was what civil society was built on, these markets.
That's great. And I think the distributed model is one that I think most privacy campaigners and a lot of technologists would argue for. The problem we have, though, is, as I mentioned, we already have 46 different systems and we're still maintaining all of these old systems, and we're just now overlaying a 47th, and therefore we have to keep all of these maintained, and therefore the weaknesses and the fraud and the problems that already exist in all of those existing systems is still there, and we're just providing extra vulnerabilities in a system where we actually know that the government have made mistakes in the past with a lot of major systems. So if we come on to look at the potential risks here, they could be enormous. And at the same time, here in the UK, we're in a society with more CCTV cameras than almost any other society in the world. Our faces are already being surveilled and we're being tracked, and our faces are a bit like an ID card already wherever we go, which is a unique identifier. Do we need ID cards on top of that? I mean, what are the implications here of when things go wrong and how badly can they go wrong?
Oh, how long is that piece of string? I think when we look at the risks, the biggest risk is, as you say, you keep building up these centralized systems and storing them. You've got to maintain them, and then they become, honeypots for cybersecurity attacks. Distributing does make it safer, does make it with a lower surface area of attack. But I think one of the biggest risks I see is the fact that the value of these proofs, these data that prove who we are and can prove what we do, it's huge for the market. Instead of showing an ID card, I just have to show that I'm above 18. Instead of explaining why is it that I'm good for $200 loan, I just have to show my transactions on my small little shop that I've been, operating for the last 10 years. All these sit in the centralized system, and the loss of its usability and value while it sits there, to me, that's the biggest problem. It's the biggest risk. The UK is struggling in economic growth. Data is the biggest fuel of that growth because it gives visibility and voice to people who then participate in well-functioning markets. The way data has to come out so that it can participate, so that people can participate in these markets. The risk is that if you keep it locked up, yes, it's great for government's own use, but the risk is then the threat is to growth, the threat is to the value and the economic progress of the country. I feel that is a huge risk. Now, in the world of digital public infrastructure that everyone else have been talking about in the rest of the world, the market actually subsidizes the cost of holding all these proofs. Because if the data is coming out safely with the right guardrails and used well in the markets, the cost to maintain substantially goes down because the market starts taking on that cost. And that could not just reduce the cybersecurity risk and threat, but create the growth mechanism that increases wealth creation and prosperity of the country. So it's a little bit of, you've got to seize the opportunity to lower that risk, if you know what I mean.
I mean, it's a huge point, isn't it? Because cybersecurity, if it is in one place, then you need one attack. If it's distributed and everybody has got their own little wallet, and there's millions of people, then there has to be millions of attacks. So it becomes much, much more difficult for somebody to attack. I mean, there's another point, isn't there, too, which is these centralized databases tend to create a prismatic view of an individual. That is, the bit that you can see for the purposes of that database. And it's going to be very difficult to challenge that if it's sat in this centralized place, isn't it, Irene?
Yes, and I think we see that in a lot of the geopolitical tensions, and we see that in the way we as society is managing our social media, our TikToks. We are getting more and more polarized between who we are. We see that manifested in who we think we are: conservative, liberal, male, female. The risk is also the hardening of a person's persona, making him feel that he is that, and therefore he needs to be consistently that. Human beings are notoriously inconsistent, and we should completely celebrate the fact that I am possibly a nitpicker, control freak on Tuesday, but completely a freewheeling spirit on Thursday, right? I mean, we have lost a bit of that because I think digital identity tends to make us far more rigid and therefore polarizing society into who we think we are and who we think we need to maintain as who we are and that identity. And that is a serious risk because it polarizes society, but it also creates a lot of tensions and conflicts within ourselves.
And also there is a danger because we're going to get locked into that, because to actually get certain services, we're going to have to manifest particular characteristics. So in a sense, you have to game the system, which is going to be quite difficult for people.
Yes, and I think particularly for a generation that's growing up with the digital realm, if we don't start to allow for a sense of liberation of who we are in the form of the identity and the data we hold, because as individuals, we don't hold anything. We don't own anything. They're all sitting in all the institutions that can prove who we are. If it doesn't come back to us to be distributed in the correct way, we are left with the people who shout the loudest, the people who gave us the ideas. And if it was that, then that's who I am. And it is a self-reinforcing loop. It's a real tragedy.
Now, Irene, what then do you think is the solution to this? You've come up with your ideas, and a lot of people seem to be going along those same lines. I mean, so Tim Berners-Lee, arguably the man who was responsible for a certain amount of this, he now says that we should have a distributed identity. What is it that you are doing?
At Dataswyft, our wallet separates the proof from the data that proves it. So you can issue a proof. I'm above 18. That's a blank template. But the data that makes the proof real, to mint the proof, is owned by you. So the proof template guy can say, you can mint it with bank data that proves that you're 18, mint it with national ID. So once it's minted and you have a proof, you can use it. You're not tracked because the data that it came from is not the same as where the proof comes from. So the issue of the proof templates can be able to tell where it's used without knowing who is using. So by keeping the template separated from the data that mints it, it keeps you private, but it also gives the proof necessary because you got getting it from the source of truth. So I'm a market design economist. So we've designed the wallet to be a sort of four-sided market so that data can come out properly to mint with different kinds of proofs to be used in different kinds of ways. And that could be something really simple, like I listen to Taylor Swift, so I'm going to mint a proof called I'm a Swiftie. It could be very low assurance type of proof, but it could also be very high assurance proof, a credit score, for example, minted from a certain set of interactions. We tend to look at the wallet as a decentralized marketplace of one of me. And the different
essentially then, what we're saying is this is an affirmation. The mistake of the past is to have this centralized system where there is somebody else who is owning your identity and owning your choices. What you're saying is that in the future, you should be given a stake in your identity. You should be the one who affirms your identity.
Correct. But then the people who govern the rules of how that proof is going to be used across the world or whatever should also have the right to provide governance rules around how, when, where the proofs would be accepted. And by separating the two, we make it much more a better functioning market. And the mistake of the past was to think that they all had to be one provider and one place. It doesn't have to be.
This sounds great in theory, and obviously there are many different models that have been espoused in the past. Unfortunately, most governments, and this government's included, have a propensity to want to do their own thing, want to invent their own technology rather than take what is very good technology off the shelf available elsewhere. This is a failing that this government has had, and it's got one login at the moment, which is a system that it adopted only a year or two ago, and now is potentially superseding that with another system. And it's yet to get the first one completely working or completely secure or adopted to any great extent. And therefore, we have a litany of problems here with a government which obviously has a propensity to want to do its own thing, to want to have ownership. What is the argument here? And are there examples elsewhere in the world where it has worked well, where a government has gone down the route that you're describing, and this has been a real benefit? What can we learn from best practice elsewhere?
I think we are at very early stages of governments understanding digital ID. I think there's a tendency for governments to think that once they issue the ID, it will be used. The use case will come. And I think many governments are starting to realize that the only use case they have found are the use cases of themselves, using it for government, for the purpose of government. I think that misses a point in terms of what the ID and the data of governments can do in the markets. What is becoming very clear is the issuance of a digital ID isn't enough. They have to start thinking about its distribution. In fact, the distribution of the information and the ID is the biggest challenge. For us, we run networks. We, aside from the wallet, of course, operate within the network. We find that in many governments we have interfaced with, and I'm sorry, I really can't talk about some of these case studies right now, but I'm happy to, buy you a drink and talk about it a little bit more. But what we find that most governments are starting to realize, they do need a network. They do need distribution. And distribution is a totally different problem and challenge from the creation of the ID. I think if you solve the distribution problem, you also solve how it's created, because distribution and the market and the network that uses it will discipline how and what tech you use. That is, I think, becoming very clear. I
Um,
I can say, however, that we are about to make a quite a sizable announcement on this in the next few days. That when it comes to the bottom of the pyramid in other parts of the world, when it comes to visibility of the bottom pyramid, the most disenfranchised, the poorest, that visibility when they own their data is collective power at an unprecedented scale. That's why it needs to come out and come up properly.
I mean, that's the point, isn't it, Irene? If you give people a stake in their data, then they actually say, yeah, this is my data, and it's in my interest to look after this data. Also, in an AI world, you can then say to people, yeah, we'll also give you a return on your data. We'll give you some money or something back from allowing us to use your data, and we'll create an agreement with you about the use of that data. So, for example, you could say to the NHS, right, let's set up a situation where we can get all of the value from this data, and we can make huge health advances, and as a result of that, we can either make the system more efficient or we can make the treatment more efficient.
That's correct. Yes. No government is going to win this. At some point, your identity is having to also go across borders. By creating something that's centralized, you are also basically, kicking yourself a little bit, because that means you've got even more towers to integrate with when we start taking ID across borders. And that gets more and more expensive. ID that travels with the person in a distributed way makes for a greater Britain outside of Britain. It's a huge resource that potentially creates a wider diaspora of what Britain means as an economy. It has and it opens up opportunities that you haven't even started to imagine. Every government can't do this. They have to think above borders. This is the future. It's not just centralizing. It is, are you locking yourself up into one country and inhibiting the growth of the country by creating an ID and not letting the markets do its job? So, what we say, oh, government, and they can centralize, that's a huge benefit and there's big risk. The biggest risk is that they're not thinking above borders.
And I think the borders issue is going to be paramount here, because we've already had some kickback from the First Minister in Northern Ireland, where she says that the whole proposal contravenes what was agreed in the Good Friday Agreement between Ireland and the UK, meaning that if we have a centralised system which is UK specific, then it can't include Northern Ireland. And therefore we need already, the moment we try to introduce something, to think about the cross-border dimension, because Northern Ireland needs to have a system that would work for both the British and the Irish in order for us to underpin the Good Friday Agreement. So there are practicalities here that I think we need to think of immediately.
Yep. Or it just goes down to another data point of another mistake.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of this is all about assertion, isn't it? As you say, you should only need a certain amount of data for a certain amount of function that exists in your distributed card or whatever it is that you're going to be using. So all you need to be able to assert is that you are from a particular country and there is this amount of information with you. You don't want to give out any more information than that, because why should you? Because it's information for a particular purpose.
And to be honest, it really shouldn't be that hard, should it? Because you give it back to me, I can bring it across borders, as I do. I bring my laptop, I bring my device, I bring my stuff. Well, could we not digitize the right thing?
In theory, you'd say it really shouldn't be that hard, but the government has a litany of mistakes with a whole load of major IT projects. Even the one login system, which was only introduced a year or two ago, have had major technical problems. So yeah, I agree, it shouldn't be that hard, but the government has a track record of making it very hard, or making it seem very hard.
I mean, one of the reasons for this is underlying government infrastructure, unfortunately, forces this this centralized system of thinking about people. It's the underlying architecture. I mean, look at it. We've got centralized computer systems in the UK, which are so old that the programmers to program them are dying. You can't find people with those skills at the moment. I mean, in a sense, really, the government's got to get up to speed with technology as well as the reasons why it installed it in the first place.
Yes, I think, I mean, I'm not here to comment about why they like big bloated budgets for big IT projects when there are much better solutions and great technology architectures elsewhere. But I do say that I think governments are used to doing things themselves. They're not used to using technology that has that the market hugely subsidizes. But yet the market has shown time and time again, you can buy subscription at $19.99. You don't have to build that. So lots of technology is available. Whether they want to use it, well, they have their own reason why they want to have a £50 million budget, right?
And the £50 million budget isn't just for building something new, it's for maintaining the 46 other systems that it's still got running, many of which, as Pete says, are archaic. Irene, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great debate, and we look forward to hopefully continuing this debate as things unfold and we learn more about how the UK is doing this, and possibly we'll hear from the announcements that you have coming up that will give examples of best practice elsewhere.
It's a real pleasure to be invited. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you.